Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Pod Stallions. I am Brian, and with me to my left is Jason.
Hello, everybody.
And today's episode is something that I've always wanted someone to ask me about at parties, but they never will, and they would regret it if they did. And that is U.S. remakes of British television shows. We've all heard of the successful ones, like All in the Family and Sanford and Son and The Office, to name a few. But there are many, many unsuccessful ones, and I thought it would be a fascinating discussion. And this was inspired by a YouTube channel that I found called 13 Week Theater that talked about a few of these, and I highly suggest you seek that channel out. It's addictive. But there is just such a plethora of interesting adaptations. And Jason and I are both what you would call Anglophiles. I grew up on British television, as did you. And I just think this is a really interesting discussion into what translates and what doesn't.
Yes, and actually, Brian, when you first mentioned the topic to me, I thought, wow, what a perfect idea. But I should also, full disclosure here and disclaimer, we are not going to cover all the game shows and reality type things that come from Europe and the UK that get remade into US shows. We're going to talk about scripted stuff. Having said that, turns out I've worked on 3 different shows that either made their way over here as a US version or made into pilots, didn't go anywhere. One was called You Are What You Eat, a reality show about dieting and people changing their lifestyles. The other one was Hit Me Baby One More Time, which was a UK show with 80s acts that came on and did their hit and then came on later in each show and did a more current song and then got judged by the studio audience. And I also did the US version of a show called Trigger Happy TV, which was a hidden camera show that a guy named Dom Jolly created over there. So I was a sort of a field director on that when it first launched. So there you go. So small world. I've worked on some UK remakes over here.
Yeah, we weren't going to actually touch the reality stuff because that seems to actually kind of translate very well for the most part. But we were going to talk about, I'm more fascinated with the train wrecks, the things that don't translate well. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that too, because I think personally the All in the Families and The Office and the Sanford and Sons, they succeeded because they found an American voice.
Right.
Because they went that extra mile and went, okay, we can't just verbatim take the show. We need to with this, Sanford and Son is based on something called Steptoe and Son, which I've never seen, but it's about junk dealers in England. But the entire popularity of Sanford and Son would be Red Fox's routine. It became a vehicle for Red Fox. And the same can be said about All in the Family, in that, the cast sold it. The fact that they Americanized it so well.
That's it. But the tropes that were there, for the father and son relationship in the original show,
yes,
translated to America with the father-son. The All in the Family took the same, they obviously with changes, but the core cast of characters kind of, and just moved it to America. Same prejudices, same, similar atmosphere and attitudes of this character. So as a format, yeah, it works. Three's Company and, the Ropers and all that stuff. Yes, but you're right. I am more fascinated too with the ones that don't work, why they don't work, and also I think you and I would be maybe the person in the room that would go, let me tell you what might be a problem here doing this show. You know, like
Yeah.
we you know what I mean? Like, and you start, because I bet you've got some at your fingertips, and I know the first one I want to talk about, but you get started.
It's so many to talk about. I'm actually kind of how do you say this? That this overwhelmed with the concepts. The one I wouldn't mind talking about is one that you may not be delving on, which is On the Buses, which was a popular show here in Canada, and it's about two bus drivers that are, I think they're well into their 50s, but they were kind of, portrayed as being in their 30s, and they're always pulling birds, as they say. And it's a pretty British show. It's a well done show. Hammer made, I think, 3 movies based on it as well that have nudity in them, which is just weird. But it was something that was growing up, I loved it, and they made a pilot, or they made a series of this. They decided to turn it into a vehicle for Dom DeLuise, who is not, any of those characters does not embrace the Dom DeLuise.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing they did, this show was about a bus driver and a conductor, and they were friends, and the bus driver lives with his mother and stuff. The immediate thing they did was they took away the buses, and Dom DeLuise is like the lost and found guy in a bus station. And it's like, first of all, you've just kind of like removed the thing they do from the show. I've never seen it.
Did he get nude in it? Was there any nudity from Dom DeLuise?
In fact, that's what it's famous for.
That might be why it went off the air.
But it was called Lots of Luck, and Carl Reiner had something to do with it. But I've never seen it. It only lasted. I think it was a bomb. It did not do well.
Mm-hmm. And what year? Do you know the year?
I believe it is 1973. So
it's early. Oh, it's early. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay.
But I think On the Buses was already a hit at that time. Like, I think it ran from like 69 to 73. So,
and that's one of those weird shows where you and I have these parallels in the stuff we were aware of, the things we were into, the things we gravitated towards it, in magazines and show, conventions and things. And then every now and then it veers off, like you getting Pertwee before Tom Baker and, stuff like that. I don't ever recall On the Buses running in America. I mean, it would have been the kind of thing they would have ran on public television, for like the UK sitcoms and Python and Fawlty Towers and things like that started to happen in the late 70s. But I don't recall ever seeing. I've seen a couple of episodes and I know about the movies, but I've never seen it. So it's funny that you got that and it was such a big thing in Canada.
Yeah, it was on Global when I was a kid.
Wow.
It was definitely a pretty well done show at the time. It was a pretty popular show at the time. But like, you guys don't have Coronation Street in the U.S., do you?
We do not. Well,
okay.
They might have, it might have been the thing that showed up on, BBC America started to run. They would run that, but no, it was never a thing growing up that I ever recall.
Yeah, that's huge in Canada. Like, I can remember. They bring the Coronation Street people for signings here every year and stuff like that. And I can honestly remember being really hungover in a friend's basement, and the father, like, it's like 9 a.m. on Sunday, and the father basically like turning on the lights, turning on the television, putting on his Coronation Street while I like laid there, you're crashing at your friend's house, and it's like, and I was like, your dad woke me up. I'm like, no, you can't mess with this Coronation Street, dude. And
did you get EastEnders too?
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that? Oh, you did.
Yeah. In fact, this is a funny story, and this kind of goes off track, but sort of doesn't. Is Canada tried to create their own version of Coronation Street. They called it Riverdale, and I can't remember when it aired. I'm going to say it was sometime in the 90s. But it was basically, Riverdale is a little neighborhood not far from me here in Toronto. In fact, a friend of mine has a restaurant there. But
Oh.
it was a CBC like television program, and it was about working class people in Toronto, which now those houses are worth like $2 billion. But I just remember watching it once. It had Jane Eastwood in it, and Jane Eastwood, of course, is that woman who was on SCTV, and she played the same character she did in a movie we were joking about in the SCTV episode.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
she's supposed to live in this like poor townhouse, and I'm watching it in my poor townhouse, and she's got this this trope of the old wooden TV is broken, so instead of throwing it out, you use it as a TV stand for the new TV.
Sure.
And I'm sitting on my couch eating ramen watching it on a TV on top of a broken TV, going, "Hey."
That's funny.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. What's yours?
Well,
what's your choice?
I don't know when I understood that All in the Family and Three's Company and Sanderson were remakes of shows. I think I might have first understood from a Beatle book, actually.
No way.
Well, because Wilfred Bramble plays Paul's grandfather in A Hard Day's Night, which is one of my top 5 movies of all time. And whenever you read anything about A Hard Day's Night, you realize he was the old man in Steptoe and Son. So by the time you get to Hard Day's Night coming out in '64, he's a household name. So he was a big name to put in that movie, because you had these 4 guys that had never acted that were kind of starting to take the country and then eventually the world by storm, but they had to fill it up with these character guys, and so Bramble was a big name. But in one of those books, I think it said remade as Sanford and Son in America or something, and I went, oh, okay, there you go. I didn't really understand what any of this stuff was until I saw a commercial. I remember distinctly, because I watched it when it aired too, seeing a commercial for Amanda's Place by the Sea, or whatever it was called.
Yes.
The B. Arthur vehicle, I think it was 82 or 83, and it was a remake of Fawlty Towers. And not the only time.
I think it was a writer's strike thing.
I don't remember, but I'll tell you this. And this is another thing that goes back to what works and what doesn't. Fawlty Towers. I mean, some people would write about. I mean, Fawlty Towers to me, and I think critically people can say this, but I mean, just for my, Python is very unique, and everybody knows how much I love all those guys. Fawlty Towers is a sitcom, but it is probably the greatest sitcom ever written. Certainly for my money, because even though they only did 12 episodes, you can break it down. 6 of them are good. The other 6, are really good. Like 4 of those are incredible. And then 2 of those are the most precise, perfect sitcom writing ever in an episode. The way they mapped it all out. And there's a reason that it hit the nerve that it did in America. And why it's really in the UK is held up as the greatest sitcom ever, because it's just some of the episodes are just perfect. But you got that one location, and I think I'd read somewhere that who were the guys that did Cheers? What was that? Not Brooks, not James L. Brooks. Who did Cheers? Who were the guys that created Cheers? I seem to recall them using Fawlty Towers as a bit of a blueprint for the bar, because you rarely leave the bar. Like, it's all kind of there, and that's where most of the action sort of takes place on this one set. Barney Miller too, but that wasn't from Fawlty Towers. But anyway, so I'm watching this commercial comes up, and I remember the line. A guest says, "I wanted a room with a view or something. I can't see all I can see are trees. I wanted to see this sea." And Maud says, "You could see it. It's right there between the land and the sky." And I remember being a kid going, "Hey, that's right."
That before.
That's from Fawlty Towers,
Yeah.
But the Fawlty Towers was, the woman says, I wanted a room with a view. And he says, "Well, you have a view." And she says, "You call that a view?" It's, they're in the room. They're in her room. And she points out, says, "That's not a view. It's nothing." Whatever. And he said, "May I ask what you expected to see outside of a Torquay hotel window? Krakatoa erupting, or wildebeests, gazelle, sweeping across the, And And then she said, I expect to see a view or something, the sea or something. And he said, it's there between the land and the sky. So the joke builds. Whereas in the show, it just was, I can't see the water. What's there between the land and the sky. So now you had a thing where you're taking the setting, you're changing the setting a bit, you're changing the gender of or the sex of the character, whatever. That's all fine. But it was like it didn't know what it was doing. It was taking scripts that existed and it was sort of bastardizing them. But what
I want to say it's a writer's strike thing where they could just do that.
But I don't know if it. What the thing about it is like I don't remember seeing Cleese's name in the credits or anything. Like I never saw. I mean, I don't ever know. Even if you're taking it and you're only taking 30-35% and leaving it in. That's pretty similar. Don't you still have to give credit for that original script? I never understood it, but I think it only lasted a handful of episodes. But the other thing it was famous for was, and it's awful because I rewatched a couple years ago on YouTube and it's awful. Tony Rosato.
Yeah, Tony Rosato. Yeah,
Tony Rosato was hired as the Manuel character, and
that's good casting.
Whereas Manuel had something to do in the original show. I mean, it's, that cast is pretty spectacular. Paulie's kind of the straight man who was, Mrs. John Cleese at the time. And then, then they got divorced when they did the second one. Prunella Scales as the wife, as Sybil, is just a glorious creation. Cleese is what he is. And then Manuel is a big part of these. Rosato had nothing to do in this show. But also that's an instance where you'd go, it seems like you're only talking about the format, and that is a huge part of that show. But it's also John Cleese. Like he is bouncing off the walls from opening of the credits to the end. He is, 90 miles an hour every episode of Fawlty Towers. And it's no matter where you put it or what you do with it. Because they remade it again. They've remade it.
Actually, Amanda's isn't the first. Did you know that? I didn't know that till just now.
I don't know I don't think I knew that. I know they did it again with John Larroquette, right?
Called it Pain. Yeah, which I've never seen, but apparently it's horrible.
See, it's a play on words. His name is Pain, and he causes pain. See?
Oh, wow. Yeah. The first version is starred Harvey Korman and Betty White, and it was called Snavely. And it was a highway motel, but it never... No, I don't know. The pilot probably aired in what they call garbage dump theater in the summer, but that just sounds like it just wouldn't be the right vehicle for Harvey Korman or Betty White. There's an interesting Cleese quote about this. I was just reading this while you were talking. Mm-hmm. The most extraordinary remake was with B. Arthur. I remember at a party I met these chaps from Viacom who said they're working on a new Fawlty Towers. My ears pricked up at the sound of cash registers and said, "That's wonderful. Are you going to change anything?" They said, "Well, we've changed one thing. We've written Basil out." And he said, "That's absolutely true. They took Basil and Sybil's lines and gave them all to B. Arthur."
Yeah. Well, there right there you go. You don't know what makes this thing work. The reason, part of the charm of it, he's not a likable character. You root for him in that show, but he's not a likable character. What he is a snob. He is a class snob that wants to be, the Plaza Hotel is never going to be. And as Cleese said once, he's someone who opened a hotel that, likes running a hotel if it weren't for all the people. And so everything involving people is an inconvenience. Well, that was his vibe. Sybil was, professional with what she did, and then Paulie, whatever. But Basil is the one that's treating this person different than this person because of how they speak or, whatever. In the remake, she's just there's no rhythm to anything she's saying or doing. It's just they're just grabbing wild lines from different characters and having her say them. They also gave her she's a widow. So there's no spouse to bounce off of like Fawlty had. And she's got a son, and he's got a wife who is like a preppy, airhead that Maud hates. And then Rosato, and then the revolving door of all the early 80s guest people that you could expect. But I just remember as a kid going, this isn't right. They can't do that. Yeah. How do they get away with that? Because I thought it was a ripoff. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. My brain didn't go, spoof. This is sanctioned. I thought it was. Yeah. I made some calls. So I called the studio. I had my friend Mark
Give me
McCall
Fred Silverman on the phone.
I've been on hold for 4 days.
Yeah.
I made some calls, wrote some letters, and apparently it worked because it only lasted like 6 weeks. It was off the air.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know Tony Rosato had died, actually.
Didn't you say that he was kind of going hard times?
He had been incarcerated for what was really mental illness. He did get released from that. But yeah, he had some serious mental health issues that got him in trouble with the law, and that all got
so sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this. I guarantee I was one of maybe 5, 12, 13, 12-year-old kids in America that recognized Tony Rosato because of SCTV.
Oh yeah.
That saw him in that and went, that's the guy in SCTV that showed up on SCTV. It was a lonely kid.
And he also did a disastrous half season with SNL because SNL in the 1980 season, they fired the showrunner and they fired a bunch of the cast, and then they brought in Catherine O'Hara, who lasted one day.
Yep.
And they offered John Candy a job, and John Candy said, "Nah, give it to Tony Rosato."
It's funny you say that, though, because I've just been dipping into. Do you remember the new show?
Yes, I loved the new show. Thank you for remembering it.
And I'm like, I probably only saw maybe 2 of those. I mean, I don't remember. The bits of it are coming back when I rewatch some of these. The Steve Martin one in particular. But man, talk about a show that was so meta. Like what it was trying to do with these sketches
was good.
So strange. With like no laughter in the audience, and there were just some weird concepts. But what a bunch of people that they got together.
Amazing talent.
Oh my God, the writers that were on that thing too was like, holy shit.
I can't believe that I can't get that, but I can get every episode of Fridays, which is garbage.
Yeah, and I think O'Donoghue was on it too. Wasn't Michael O'Donoghue part of it too?
Yeah, it was like all of Lorne Michaels' connections were in that. Like you had Buck Henry, you had John Candy, you had Dave Thomas, you had. I think Dave Thomas
was kind of I think he was like in charge of the show, kind of. And
and he was.
Candy showed up a few times.
Candy was in a lot of them, and the new show was one of my favorite programs out there. It just didn't last, and it died, and it was sort of like a second breath for SCTV. It was a weird show, and then all of a sudden
you're like, there's Kevin Kline. What the hell's Kevin Kline doing there? And there's Carrie Fisher shows up, and then Gilda Radner shows up and doesn't say a word, and all of a sudden Paul Simon walks into a room and has one line. And it was just a strange. It's the kind of thing that you'd think would get like a DVD set or something, like a like a little making of doc or something on it.
Yeah.
But but a lot of them are up on YouTube. But anyway, I was going to mention that to you, but now you brought up it's in that weird wilderness of like 83, 84, when Lorne was away from SNL and all that other stuff was going on. But
I'm so glad you remembered it, because no one else does.
I remember it. Sure.
So I'm going to go into one that actually worked but got canceled, and that was a show called Open All Night, which was based on
I remember Open All Night with George Zunza and that tall
Susan Terrell.
I remember that
Sam
show.
Whipple.
I watched every episode of that show.
Me too. And some brave soul has put a half a dozen of them on YouTube. And this is a story of Gordon Feaster. That is based. Years later, I was watching PBS, and I'm watching this Ronnie Barker show called Open All Hours.
Yep.
And midway through it, I went, "Hey, this is Open All Night." Like it's a British, But what Jay Tarsis did was he Americanized it well, and he hired George Zunda, who is not a comedian.
He was great in it.
Everybody was great in it. Susan Terrell. You had Letterman appearing in every episode as a weirdo.
Yeah.
And it just worked. Why that got canceled, I don't know. I think it might have been a time slot thing.
I watched that every week because I thought
so good.
The scrawny guy that played her son,
Sam Whipple,
he just kind of was. He had this knack of just walking, on screen and just stealing whatever scene he was in, because the delivery he had was so good.
And he never really kind of like went anywhere. Sadly, he's dead. And
is he dead?
yeah, he died years ago.
You know what? You know what I think of when I think of him. The other thing I think of, and you're probably going to know this, and then we need to get off the phone because it's too weird. He showed up in the movie The Doors, the Oliver Stone movie. He showed up in the Oliver Stone movie The Doors. You remember the famous story about The Doors where they're going to do a show for ABC, whatever it was, and the line is "Girl, we couldn't get much higher."
Oh yeah, girl.
And he's the exec that goes, "Can you just change that word? It'd be like, girl, it can't get no better." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, man, we'll do that, sure." And then they do it, and he looks down the lens and says, "We couldn't get much higher," and everybody, poops their pants. He's the exec, and I remember when I saw the movie, going, "Hey, that's the guy from Open All Night."
Yeah, he also played Jughead in that Return to Riverdale TV movie.
Oh my god! With who was the other one? Gary
Kroeger is Reggie, yeah.
Gary Kroeger.
I think probably his biggest, most iconic thing he ever did, which is sad, is he's the phone repairman in a Seinfeld where Elaine says, I could kill you and nobody would notice. And he said, yeah, I could do the same to you.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't pop up a lot. And
I didn't know.
The British version of that is much more the dynamic between the two of them, the father and the stepson, whereas the American version is much more layered in the whole cast. Like, it's a sitcom with Susan Tyrrell in it. Like, she was not terribly well known for sitcoms. She's an interesting cat.
She is. Is she still
She's
alive?
dead too.
She died. Yeah, because she got ill. I think she lost a leg, didn't she, or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but she was something. But yeah, not the person you'd cast in that in a sitcom necessarily. Susan Tyrrell.
It was they added characters of the cops and that sort of thing. But yeah, I love Open All Night. And I even like Open All Hours. But yeah, that should have gotten. That's one of the ones that like. It worked. It just didn't find an audience, It was actually well done. But let's talk about one that didn't work, and that would be I don't know if you've ever seen this. The IT Crowd, or the It Crowd, got a pilot.
I never saw the pilot. I know Ayoade's in it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They always do that. They always bring over one cast member, and we're going to see that trend going forward. When we start talking about some other things, the first thing they lose is Joel McHale as Roy, which is a typical trope in the American versions. And that's the thing, British TV shows, like you look at the British soap operas, they're about people that are working class, and American soap operas are about pretty rich people.
Right.
And that sort of kind of tells you that there's a bit of a cultural divide there,
Yeah.
And, to cast Joel McHale as Roy doesn't kind of work for me.
Yeah. And
then, of course, the other problem was that the woman playing Jen didn't really have the comic timing of the UK Jen, who's awesome. And, then you have the other thing is that you're not going to get a Matt Berry to play Douglas. Right. That to me, by the way, I wanted to know yours, and I'll ask you at the end of the episode. I think the most un-US remakeable TV show that I can think of from the UK would be Toast of London. I don't think you could remake that as a US version without just taking the entire cast from Toast of London.
Well, I think it's you're dealing with once again, a la, something like Fawlty Towers, the character, or Reginald Parent too. That's another great example of.
Yeah, well, we should get into that.
But we were, last time we mentioned it, we were talking about what a force of nature Leonard Rossiter is. Like when he's on screen, hit the motor mouth and the, just the rapid fire stuff and his movements and his manic, like that's really what the thing was. Yes, the writing is there and all that, but you're trying to get lightning to strike again with that. And Matt Berry, I love Matt. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, keep going.
No, I was gonna say I love Matt Berry to death. You go into a Matt Berry thing knowing he's in there, not expecting something particularly different from Matt Berry. It's what he does best. So if you were going to bring that over here, you kind of go, anything else would just be somebody trying to imitate this character. I was never into, and again, nothing against it, I just never got into the U.S. Office. I saw bits and pieces of it, but I thought the smartest thing they did was make it a bendable kind of blueprint, and because Carell's
finding their
character,
own voice.
Yeah, Carell's character was a different character than Brent. He made you squirm, but it was like, well, they all kind of make you squirm.
Well,
like all
to be
these
perfectly
bosses.
honest with you, I've seen The Office a million times. My wife just plays it in a constant loop, and in fact, I think she could just fall asleep to the piano music. What they did was the first 6 episodes are pretty much on course with the Ricky Gervais, and it's failing. Like even Carell kind of is made to look like Ricky Gervais. His hair's slicked back. He's made to look like he's chubby. They did a big course correct in the second season. And his hair is different. He's a little more empathetic. They found their own voice.
Yeah.
And it really did make the series, because like the first 6 episodes are a lot like the UK Office. And then they got renewed by a miracle, it seems, and then they changed.
And that's an example of something. Here's another one that also. But yes, I would agree with the Toast to London thing. That is kind of a that's one of those things that the light bulb at the center of it is this character that I think anything you end up doing, if you don't have it that big and broad and ridiculous, not going to work. But then it just looks like you're just copying, doing the exact copy of the thing that was. And the weird thing about some of this stuff is it's become, and this is a little sidebar, editorial type thing here, is that there's so much of it now. It is so prevalent now. There are so many things that come up that the last one I could think of was on Amazon. What was the show that just ended up on Amazon with John Cusack? It's about a comic book that's like an underground comic that people are talking about.
Oh yeah, they remade that. You're right.
Not Eureka, but what's it called? Shit. The UK version of that, the first season of that UK show is fantastic. It is fantastic, and that's also streaming up either on BritBox or Amazon Prime, I think, in America. But now I'm going to get the name of it. It's going to drive me nuts. Now, the U.S. version is good, and frankly, it's pretty good. And frankly, they had to put a disclaimer in front of it because the subject matter was so spot on with what was happening in 2020 in the world that people could be mistaken for thinking it was like some kind of a documentary kind of thing. But it still never reached the unsettling, squeamish strangeness of the original show. And so I just there are times you just go like, everything is, there's no original ideas. Everything is coming from, a lot of things are coming, beyond the reality type stuff. A lot of formats are just coming to America and Americanizing the thing. And I think the notion is, the other notion that's happening in America, especially too, is UK actors. And while I have nothing against them, there's the thinking behind it in casting is, who's the guy that's in Walking Dead, the sheriff that was in Walking Dead, Andrew Lincoln or whatever. The thinking, the argument would be, well, how do you know he can carry a show? And then the counter argument would be, well, because he's been on 3 or 4 shows in the UK, so we know he can. Okay, well, can he do an American accent? Yeah, pretty good. Let's roll the dice. He'll be unknown, which is great for us because we got a brand new star in America. And we know he can carry a series because he's done it several times in the UK. And so there's this huge influx of British leading actors doing American parts. You saw it in Hannibal, what's his name, who played the detective or the whatever in Hannibal. You could go down a list. It's ridiculous. So it's this kind of cliff notes of what might work, because everyone's afraid to come up with an original concept and push the boat out. They go, well, this thing ran for, and the difference, of course, and now America is starting to adopt this notion. You'll notice,
doing less episodes.
Yes, the 6, 8, 10 episode seasons of shows, which is the standard for the UK forever. They're starting to kind of get the gist. But sometimes it's I'll give you, this is a great example to me that I wasn't against on principle, but I knew from the get-go it wasn't going to work. Was a show called Life on Mars.
Oh,
when Life on Mars hit, it would originally hit in the UK. This was prior to the Eccleston Doctor Who coming back, I believe, and it sort of was kind of
the original. Yeah, you're right. The original British version.
The original British one was prior to the Eccleston Doctor Who, and when this thing hit, man, I was obsessed with this show because it was just an absolutely brilliant concept. An anal retentive detective does everything by the book, and forensic evidence and gets into an accident, wakes up in 1973 Manchester, which, the world is completely gray and drab, completely and utterly politically incorrect, completely and utterly corrupt, and it's like the Old West. And he doesn't know how he got there, why he's there. The audience doesn't know. And then beyond all that, it becomes a procedural. So you have this detective that is still aware of a world outside of 19, and the whole time he's going, you're not real anyway. So yeah, okay, let's go ahead and solve this crime. Let's see what happened. But then, and as the show progresses, he starts locking horns with the police captain, played by Philip Glenister, which is a typical, it's throwback to the Sweeney and stuff, like, throwing suspects up against a wall and beating them to death and shit. And so you had this incredible concoction of talking about the politics of the time and race and sexism and the musical score. I mean, the musical score in the show is incredible. The way it was shot, the theme tune, etc. But what it had was, being on UK television, it could go places that I knew a network show could not go. It could go there with language. It could go there with race and all the things mentioned, and wouldn't have to apologize. The second you try to bring a show like that to American television and go back and do a period thing, your hands are tied immediately. You're not going to have the grit that this thing had.
Where that was the one thing, it really didn't have the balls. I did really like it, but I do agree with you that it should have been like HBO or somebody doing it, because the first thing that really drove me nuts about it was the lack of smoking.
Yep.
And
smoking,
the second thing,
drinking, everything. Yeah.
The lack of you needed racism in there. You needed all the things that would be there. And unfortunately, it was on ABC and it was neutered. Great cast.
Good cast. Yeah.
Good
cast.
Premise.
Yep.
And at least, I know a lot of people don't like the ending of it, but at least it decided, all right, we're done with this show and we're going to end it.
Yeah, and I give him credit for that. But so let's go back to the original. Did you ever continue with Ashes to Ashes?
Yeah, I didn't get into it as much.
Well, when you get to the end of Ashes to Ashes, should you ever go back to it? I think it's got one of the most satisfying wrap-ups of a 5-season show. 2 with Life on Mars and 3 with Ashes to Ashes, and she's terrific. Keeley Hawes and Glenister. I'd watch Philip Glenister just read the phone book. He's so good in everything he does. But it's a crazy arc. It's a really interesting thing that they kept going through 5 seasons of a show and 2 different characters, and you do get a bit of a payoff toward the end, that final season, and it's really interesting if you ever want to revisit it. But kudos to Matthew Graham and what's his name, who created those shows, because they're great. Graham ended up working on New Who, I think. Matthew Graham. You know
what the thing is? They're finite.
Yeah.
I don't think that they deserve 10 seasons.
Yeah, and that was John Sims' kind of attitude, was let's be done with it. Let's wrap him up. Let's wrap his Sam Tyler's they wanted to go. They wanted to keep going. They had a hit show on their hands, and it was a fantasy type show, and it was working, and it was the reviews were outstanding, and the ratings were great. And John Sims said, let's make it something special. Let's we're done. Let's wrap this up with him. And they did it really, really, really well. I just remember that ending of season 2 just going, oh man, it was just a punch,
Yeah.
But then they continue it with a whole new show, and it's like, God bless him, But like on paper, you go, you do this the right way in America, this will work. You can put this in Brooklyn, the same thing, same kind of. But if you do it on a network, you're going to miss the whole point of what this thing was trying to do.
Exactly.
And,
now, the original pilot actually, they reshot the entire show. The original pilot was set in L.A., and it didn't have Harvey Keitel. It had Colmini, and they scrapped the whole thing before they aired it, and turned it into what they did, where they shot it in New York, which was the wiser thing to do. And they had Harvey Keitel, and they had Christopher from The Sopranos.
Yeah, Imperioli, right?
Michael
Yeah.
Imperioli. It should have been a bigger hit than it was.
Oh, and the guy that was the lead, you know where he's from, right?
No.
I think he's either from Ireland or the.
I know he's Irish. Yeah,
he's Irish. He's Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying another actor comes over here, taking my jobs. No, I'm kidding. He didn't take my job. I wasn't up for Life on Mars. I know it's hard to believe I never got an audition for that, but didn't happen. Didn't work out this time.
No,
but
you brought up The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, and I wanted to elaborate on that. That is a brilliant television show about a man going through a midlife crisis, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
But it really is, and this is the problem with a lot of remakes of British shows. First of all, the content is a little dodgy for American television, and the fact that the show's initial premise is he is trying to screw his secretary. But he also has a rich fantasy life, and it eventually, I haven't watched that show in 30 years, but I mean, the starting of the show is a man walking into the sea to fake his own death, and he eventually does. I think he does bed down his secretary, but doesn't do anything with her. And
I think it's about 4 or 5 episodes in, I think, because I rewatched season 1. I don't know how I found it. Maybe I had the DVD or something from Amoeba. And I think it, like 4 or 5 episodes in, it starts to grow, and it's either in the middle of the day at his house or they meet somewhere or something, but he doesn't go through with it. But
yeah,
it's out in the open. Yeah.
But by the end of it, I think he's running a commune. It's just gotten very strange.
Yeah, he opens that store.
Yeah.
He opens a store that just sells crap. It's like isn't it called like Tat or something? And it's just it sort of predicted the disposable faddish item shops, and he had a hit. The store was a hit, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the gist of it?
Yeah. The whole it just keeps building and getting weirder, and I just
would you say that that's a show that really a huge chunk of how that thing works is because of that lead?
Yeah, it's all based on the lead. He opens the store's called Grot.
That's it.
Yeah.
Grot.
And I think it did sort of get remade as Dream On in the concept alone, where like he's constantly flashing to fantasies.
Yeah.
And but there was an American remake called Reggie, and I remember this because I watched it as a kid, and then years later I watched Reginald Perrin on PBS, and I remember going, I saw this as an American show. And it's a Richard Mulligan vehicle, and it's awful. It's just terrible. They've neutered it. It's just him having daydreams all day.
Did they sort of? I don't know if I maybe remember seeing a commercial, but I don't know if I would have known it was a remake of Reginald Perrin.
Well, I hadn't seen Reginald Perrin at the time, but I figured it out.
Did they sort of? Do you know if they sort of recycled scripts like they did for for
No, I
Fawlty?
just remember they did a lot of fantasies and they were awful. Like I can just remember him picturing his boss and he's putting his boss like on a torture rack or something like that. And it was just like it you could tell why it got canceled. It was shit. It was bad. Um, it just didn't translate well. They didn't do a good job. Um,
And this would be a good point though. This would be a good time to take a pause for a second and say, we've if we one of the recurring things we probably said in this show all these years is we have nostalgia for things and we have an affinity for a certain time frame, and we don't love everything that came from where we came from, kind of like it's
no,
not
not
like
everything was good. No.
not everything was good. And when you start digging through some of these shows, so for every WKRP in Cincinnati, there are, dozens of Reggies and, Amanda's A Place by the Sea, or like, the Bleacher Bums of whatever, like these shows that only lasted, like every now and then you go to YouTube and they'll do someone will post a video of like just the opening credits of all the new sitcoms or shows that hit in 1978 or something.
Some of them are like 5 minutes long. You ever notice that? Like the
Oh my
intros. Good
God, they're
Lord.
like, there's one there. Do you remember the one that Patrick McGowan did in like 77 or 78? And it's called like, I don't remember. It's called like Hannity or something, like whatever the character's name is. The opening credits are him walking through a park with his sport jacket over his shoulder, rolling up his sleeves. And it says, Hannity or whatever this name is. And then there's these quick little clips of him in other scenes, back to the park, quick little jumps of it, back to the park. And every time they go back to the park, the name shows up on screen again. And it's Patrick McGowan just walking through a park. And you go, I don't even know what this show's about.
Yeah.
Is he a professor? Is he is he a detective? Like, who is he? But yeah, they go on forever. But there's so many, when you watch these things, you're like, I just watched the opening credits of like 20 shows. I only recognize 4 of them.
Oh yeah.
Like so much shit came and went that was so bad. Every now and then there's something that shows up briefly that's so good, like an open all night kind of thing. You want it to stick around, but so much of this stuff doesn't work. So this makes me embrace the stuff that does work and that's brilliant, like a WKRP or Barney Miller or whatever, even more. That the writing was so good on those shows and the timing and everything,
Yeah, absolutely. When things work, it's wonderful. But yeah, there's so much that's left by the wayside that we've forgotten, and the memory cheats.
Yes, totally. Like,
and,
there's no denying Holmes and Yo-Yo is a classic.
Of course.
But is it as good as we remember? It's hard to say.
I think it's exactly as good as I remember.
It's hard to say. Those opening credits, good Lord, that's like the Iliad and the Odyssey, the opening and closing credits of Holmes and Yo-Yo.
The worst opening credits I can think of from the 70s, Gemini Man, is like getting teeth pulled. Like they try to explain the concept of the series in the opening credits, and it's like, okay, we get it.
Well, I always like the ones where they have the characters going, are you trying to tell me that I have to live in an apartment with a penguin and a rooster for the next 6 months if I'm going to inherit that money? That's what I said. I'm the judge. They give you that. They give you that premise every week in the opening credits, in case you forgot what the show was about last week.
Stupid. And yeah.
Are you telling me all 8 of these kids are mine?
Yeah.
They are now. Yeah. And then 5 more minutes of credits.
Miller Milkus production. Yeah, that I could go on for hours about.
We should do a whole episode on credits. Best
horrible
and worst
openings of television shows.
Best and worst.
Just do a live
credits.
stream on YouTube, and
that's why the end credits for Police Squad are still one of the greatest things. In the history of television, that are just, they're so sublime.
Even like Bosom Buddies.
Bosom Buddies, yeah.
Bosom Buddies had like a 14-minute intro. Like the show's half over because they just were so afraid of explaining that these guys were, dressing up as ladies to get into the,
Well, but they also did it to the tune of My Life by Billy Joel.
but it
And it's
isn't Billy
almost
Joel.
it's
It's a
almost the
sound
entire
alike.
I know, but it's almost the entire song. It's
Yes.
like who was sitting in the network going, you know what this opening credit synopsis thing needs is a pop song, and then someone else goes, Billy Joel, My Life.
Yeah.
Like, do what you want. It's my life. I'm going to dress like a woman, and this is where I'm going to live, and nothing you can do about it. Yeah, okay, that's a good connection. Like, I could never figure that out as a kid either. Like, what? Because had you ever heard a pop song used in an opening credit of a show like that?
Well, no, I don't. You're right. I think that was pretty rare.
Yeah.
The next one I can think of is Get a Life using REM Stand.
Oh yeah, that was good. That was a good use though. That was fun. Yeah.
Which they didn't. I guess they kind of had to pull from syndication after.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, somebody told me that like when they played it in syndication, which it didn't really get a lot of syndication.
Was Michael Stipe just sitting on his couch one night at like 2 a.m. and went, "Hey,
I just don't think the show paid for that.
Really? Okay.
Well, you've heard the famous story about the needle drops in WKRP, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. So I think it was like one of those situations where nobody thought that was going to get syndicated because it only had 2 seasons.
That held up that DVD set forever, and then I think the set that I have even still has a few tweaks that couldn't make it into the that they couldn't get cleared for the show. I mean, to put on DVD.
I'm just going through this list, and here's one that I actually enjoyed, but it didn't last long, was the U.S. remake of Men Behaving Badly, which was just called Men Behaving Badly. It was a Rob Schneider and Ron Eldard vehicle with Justine Bateman, and the first season was actually a lot of fun. What ruined that show, it got to a second season, was that apparently Bateman and Eldard were so bad on the set that they were both fired. So the second season, they brought in Ken Marino from the state and tried to recreate it, and it was canceled within like 6 weeks.
Do you know what's weird about that? Do you know about the original?
Yeah, I watched the original too. Yeah.
But you know so Harry Enfield.
Yeah, I like Harry Enfield.
Yeah, he was in season 1, right? And then he left, or they got rid of him, and then they brought in Paul Morrissey, right? Isn't that what happened?
Oh, okay. I didn't know the history of the show.
Oh yeah, Harry Enfield and Martin Clunes were the two leads for Men Behaving Badly in the UK, and then it either wasn't working with him, or he decided to leave, or they wanted him to leave. I forget. Enfield goes, and then series 2, Paul Morrissey comes in, and then it becomes this huge hit, and it's him and Martin Clunes, who, ironically, Martin Clunes played Reginald Perrin in the most recent remake called Reggie Perrin.
I didn't know that they remade that.
Yeah.
Harry Enfield was on a great program called Harry and Paul. That's very funny.
Yes.
And probably you couldn't get away, like Little Britain, you couldn't get away with that stuff now.
No.
But it is.
Do you remember Harry Enfield and Chums? Do you remember that original show?
No, I don't know that one.
So you remember the Fast show, right?
Yes, I remember the Fast show. Yeah.
So Paul Whitehouse and Charlie Higson were writers on the Harry Enfield and Chums, and they kept coming to him and they'd be on camera too. They kept coming to him with these different characters, and he's like, "No, it's not funny enough. It's not good enough." And then they go off and put a demo together for the Fast show with these goofy characters, and it becomes this huge hit. So Harry gave them one of their first breaks on the Enfield show. But Paul Whitehouse used to do a bit on the Enfield and Chums where he was Michael Caine looking out a window, and he'd turn to the camera and go, "Hello, my name is Michael Caine, and I am a nosy neighbor." And he'd do this whole thing, and all he did all day was stand and watch the neighbors. Like, she claims to be a vegetarian, but I know because I saw her at the butcher's and she bought a pound of sausages. She's a liar, whatever. And then back to the window, and they just kept cutting to these 30-second bits throughout the series. Those are up on YouTube somewhere, like Michael Caine, the nosy neighbor, and it's the most perfect Michael Caine impression ever done by Paul Whitehouse.
Oh, I'd have to check that out.
What about Spaced? I know that Spaced got remade in America. I never saw it. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but didn't it get a pilot at one point? Didn't they try to make an American version?
They did do an American version. I have never seen it. Just one second. I'm just closing a window here. Let me try and see if there was actually any casting on that, because that's another show that it could have worked.
Along those lines, there's another one, Red Dwarf. Didn't they try to do an American Red Dwarf?
Well, yeah, I wanted to get to that one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there is an American pilot, but there's almost no information on space. Wait a minute, here we go. Edgar Wright didn't like it. That's all I know about it. Mike can't actually have guns, they would take out all the drugs and swearing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Again, not a show you would think you would put on network television anywhere in America. You'd go get it up the dial somewhere, but you can't do what that made that show so great, And the cast too. The cast of that show is such perfection. But again, isn't it funny that we're coming at this as people that are familiar with these things? We're the weirdos because we know about some of these things that we grew up with, or we're aware of finding these things when they hit somehow. Do you think some of these things, playing devil's advocate, do you ever think some of these things don't work because, like, why didn't Life on Mars work? If you assume that the bulk of the audience that's watching it doesn't know anything about the original, even though it eventually ran on like BBC America sort of thing. Do you think there's something to that too, that it doesn't work? We know both products. We know the original product, we know the remake, and we can say why we think it doesn't work. But do you think there's something more to it, that the recipe gets ruined and then doesn't find an audience anyway, because for people that have never seen it before anyway?
It's a good question. I would have to say that the first thing is that Life on Mars wanted to do a full 26 episode season, and you're dealing with something that's finite. It has 12 episodes.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those things where you're building a mystery.
Yeah.
And you can do this paint yourself in a corner bullshit where you built just too much mystery. And I remember watching Lost with my wife and going this is never going to satisfy you.
Right.
They're just building so much mystery. I don't believe they have an ending. And I'm not going to do Schadenfreude or say I was right, but no,
you can feel it when you get to a show that you dig. You can kind of feel when you go, I think this thing knows what it's doing. They have a plan.
Yeah.
And there is a difference. And I think Life on Mars is one of those things that they had about 75% of their plan, and then started to kind of go somewhere else when it started to wrap up. But they wanted it to go longer. And one of the shows I love, that's a recent show, was called Lodge 49, and it was on AMC here. I think it was AMC or TMC or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's now up on Hulu. You can watch all, both seasons. But it was that kind of show that had these little mysteries in it, and the strangeness, and what does that mean? And that's these different things happening, and they had it all laid out. They knew this was going to be like a 4-season thing, and each season was going to be slightly built around one of the elements, fire, water, etc. But you can kind of tell when a show is just you're kind of making this up as you go, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think
it's titillating, but.
Yeah, and Life on Mars had a really interesting ending, and it's open for interpretation, but it's remaking The Prisoner. You can't.
Yeah.
You really can't.
And I'd also give them this though. The ending they did do was audacious, I think. The American one.
Yeah.
Also completely different, really, from where the show goes with Sam in the UK.
Yeah.
And certainly where it ends up in Ashes to Ashes with the characters in Ashes to Ashes.
Yep. No, it's
So,
completely different, and I respect its ending. I
yeah,
think a lot of people felt let down, but I was like, hey, it's an ending. They ended the show, and that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. Most shows don't get to. Yeah.
One of your favorites, The Thick of It, is basically we got turned into Veep.
It did. It's a
Yeah.
great. I'm glad you brought that up because that's nobody ever talks about that, but that's kind of what happened. Like it's
Yeah.
and again, that's a show that the thick of it is like it's Malcolm Tucker. It's everybody in that show, and it's every scenario, every episode. But the engine of that show is Malcolm Tucker. I mean, it's so larger than life.
And there is no Malcolm Tucker in the U.S. version, really.
No.
But Veep does the right thing, and that is that it gets an American voice for it, and
that's right.
I think it stands as equally as good, to be honest with you.
I do too. I will say that I think, I adored Veep. I feel like the last season or two, it kind of started to lose its way in the sense of its meanness. It was always a mean show. These are not nice people doing nice things. But it sort of got to a point in the last season or two that was just, especially the very last season, was so dark that I feel like it almost crossed a line, not like an offensive line, but just it kind of crossed the line. Because if you watch the UK one, Malcolm has these moments of tenderness. He has these sort of, come on, it's all an act. Let's just sit down and have dinner, and come on, tell me about where did you go to school? There's none of that in Veep. I mean, there's no intimacy or hugging whatsoever in Veep. But that's a great one to bring up, because I think that's, somebody said, you can't really do thick of it. It's not going to work. Let's and what a great way to change the narrative too. To have, her character, best thing, they put her in so many things, and she's so wonderful, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But who'd have thought
she's amazing in that?
Oh my God, who'd have thought she would have two characters in her career that are such huge, signposts? Like, they're such massive characters. She's both incredible.
Terrible human beings.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
but that's a great example. Yeah.
So let's get to the one we've been dancing around, and that is Red Dwarf.
Okay. All right.
It did have 2 pilots, and both of them are awful. The first thing I want to say is that, no offense to actor Craig Bierko, who's a good actor, but he is not Dave Lister.
Right.
The first thing is he's white, and the second thing is he's super handsome. You know what I mean? Like, he's a good looking guy, and that's the first. It's the Joel McHale thing.
Once again, yep.
The second thing is they brought over one UK cast member, and it's Robert Llewellyn as Crichton. Probably not the best member of the cast to bring over, but a good member of the cast. The one good thing about the show is the casting of Holly as Jane Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
The rest of it, I can't remember the guy who plays Rimmer, and I can't remember the guy who plays Cat in the first pilot. Or is it a guy in the first pilot? God,
I hadn't even thought of Bierko until you said the name. Like, I totally forgot he was in that.
Yeah, he's
I was dating someone whose dad's girlfriend managed him, and he had at that time he was in The Long Kiss Goodnight, and they were trying to make him the next, Ben Affleck or something, I think, sort of. And then, around that same time, I read his name somewhere in this remake, because the remake was what, early 90s, mid 90s?
Early 90s, like 92, yeah.
92, okay.
Yeah. The first Cat was a dude, and then they redid the pilot. I guess they decided to retool the pilot, and it's Terry Farrell is now Cat.
Terry Farrell. Oh, yeah. No kidding.
And they recast the Rimmer, and everybody's white in that version. And yeah, it was. They did try to get Chris Berry to play Rimmer in the second pilot, and he said no. Um, yeah, it just didn't go anywhere, and I've always gotten the feeling from the creators that they didn't care that it didn't get picked up. Like they just they were not happy about any of it. And
That seems to be the vibe for most of them. I mean, Gervais might be the exception, and maybe that's part of one of the reasons that it kind of worked was, trying to kind of help with things. But
yeah,
the general consensus from creators seems to be, good. Edgar Wright, the Red Dwarf guys, Cleese, they're all kind of like, just leave it alone. Just come up with another show and just kind of leave it alone. But along those lines, there is one show that there was a time there where everybody talked about it, and in fandom and everything, and in the back of my head I also kind of thought someone's going to do something, and that I never quite understood why nobody took the push was a US version of Doctor Who. That there would have been in those doldrums, and then you end up getting the TV movie. But it was I never fully understood why. It's not like that was a $200 million motion picture that only made $10 million. It was a TV movie. It didn't cost a ton of money, and it was a property that the BBC or whatever. I just never understood why they didn't just go, let's just do a weekly, let's do another TV movie and then just do a weekly series. We'll shoot it in Vancouver or whatever. And, I mean, this is all a good thing that it didn't happen. But I always thought we would see that pop its head.
I remember being so excited about that when it came out and thinking it was awesome. But at the same point, we were so deprived for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
At the time, like you gotta I watch it now, and there's some wonderful stuff in there. I think McGann is the major takeaway. He was a great cast.
Hands down. He could have been performing in a script that was, half, less as good as what the final thing was even. And the final thing is not like it's great, but he still would have been the takeaway. I
really loved the church looking TARDIS and other things like that. But to be honest with you, it's not great. It's not a great pilot, to be perfectly honest with you. No. And I can forgive things like making the Doctor half human because worse things have happened to the canon since then. But it isn't bad. It isn't like I think it's an abomination. I quite like it. But what do you say?
But you were probably like me when that thing hit. You sat there going, I hope this is cool. I hope this works. I hope they get it. And I kind of was ready for it to be just a terrible American, misfire, or remake or something, kind of a misfire. And the fact that McCoy was there, and I thought, oh, well, somebody.
That's the kind of stuff that was great.
And then as soon as McGann shows up, because of course I'm a big Withnell and I fan. Like I've been following him since then, and so for him to get cast was like, oh yeah. And as soon as he shows up, you just go, holy shit, he's really into this. Like he's really doing it. And sadly, he's if it's a 90-minute thing, he's only in 60 minutes of it or whatever it is, but it's all there. He's doing his best to launch this thing as a vehicle, and that is the takeaway. You're absolutely right. I don't remember much else about it.
The biggest takeaway, I think, was on Russell T Davies, because he looked at it and went, "You don't do a regeneration in the first episode,
right?
And you just introduce the Doctor," and he was absolutely right. And,
but isn't that funny that's now how our brains kind of work now, that you could do a show now, bring something back, and not have to. You could let a show go for 3 or 4 episodes with a new face, and episode 2, somebody goes, "Hey, whatever happened to? Are we going to talk about Brian or what?" Like later, you'll find out when and you could play it backwards throughout the season of where that character went, and you could get away with it. Back then, the linear thinking was, well, we have to. There's fans out there, and we have to logically get them from A to B, and you know what I mean? It was that was how nervous. Have you ever seen on the DVD, one of the DVDs, they go into the making of for that? It's like a 90-minute
I think I've seen it. I just don't remember it.
It's just like you're just going, the number of people that are, the number of times it was tried, the number
Oh,
of people
I read
involved.
an entire book about that. There is a fantastic book out there about all the different attempts to make a movie, and starting with Doctor Who meets Scratchman and all that stuff. And yeah, it's fascinating how much rigmarole that went through. It's
And the
amazing it got
Nelvana,
made at all.
there was the Nelvana one, right? The
Yeah, the
animated one, the
cartoon. Yeah, yeah, I have the
cartoon.
animation cell for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was, I found that in my friend, I guess some animator wanted to buy some toys or something and dropped off a huge box of cells, and I went through it and I found that Doctor Who one, and my friend sold it to me for like $10. Um,
Wow.
yeah. I have that
But
hanging in my hallway.
wouldn't you say that the majority of stuff that has gotten remade, that has worked, for the most part has been comedic? Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think the stuff that really works is the reality stuff.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah, that's been the
but
biggest.
yeah, I mean, the comedic stuff is hit or miss, but I think it is the most successful. I mean, you have stuff. Gosh, I'm just trying to think what would be a successful British drama that was brought over here, and I'm sure there is stuff, and I'm just not thinking of it. But I was mainly focusing on sitcoms because I love sitcoms. One other one I wanted to talk about that was a complete disaster, and I would pay $10 to see it. Is they tried to remake The Young Ones.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
they called it Oh No Not Them. MTV was playing The Young Ones, and it was a hit. So they tried to remake it. They hired Nigel Planner. So again, bringing one cast member over to try and
Oh
sell
wow.
this thing. And I've never seen it. I think the opening credits are available somewhere,
Okay.
but because I've seen those opening credits, but I guess Nigel Planner like just wanted to leave while filming. Like yeah, there's a 19-second clip of the credits. That is it, and that is bizarre. Um,
Somebody
but
must have snuck that out somewhere.
But there's another failed pilot that I think you and I should watch and talk about in the next episode, and that is Are You Being Served? Got a pilot in the U.S. called Beans of Boston, and
It's in Boston.
it has a great cast. It has John Hillerman as Mr. Peacock, Tom Poston as Mr. Beam, Charlotte Rae, Mrs. Garrett as Mrs. Slocum.
Ooh, who plays her
Yes.
pussy?
Yes, I'm sure that got just completely written out of it.
I know. How do you do that show without Mrs. Slocum
It's
talking about her cat?
just all innuendo.
Did
Like
you ever
it's
see? Do you remember? What was the one they did after The Young Ones? Was it Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, or was it? Yeah, it was Filthy Rich. They did one season of a show called Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, and Rick Mayall plays this. He was like a child actor or something, and he's got this horrible agent, and he books him on some game show that's called Ooh Sounds a Bit Rude. It's the name of the game show. And there's a Mrs. Slocum ripoff in front, and she's always going, "Oh, I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but I know that my pussy's cold," or something,
oh
And
yeah.
he just keeps going, "Oh, shut up with those lines!" Like he's always like on her. He's always trying to hog the camera. But that was their, again, their subversive, like, enough of these shows. This is not our comedy, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
But the game show is called Ooh Sounds a Bit Rude. It's the name of the game show. I'd love to see So what year was Beans of Boston? Late 70s, early 80s?
1979.
Jeez. How could you miss with that cast?
Yeah, well, you can because you're draining the show of what makes it popular in the first place.
And what was the Beans of Boston referring to? Like a store?
Department store. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you this then. What is a show that you think never really got touched or even discussed that you think would make a good US remake? or
Uh,
Canadian or whatever, like, you know, a UK
oh, like
show.
what UK show could be
Yeah,
remade?
yeah.
Gosh, there's a lot to be mined. Let me just think.
Didn't expect that one, did you?
No, and I had one, and then it just floated away.
And don't say the tripods, because that's mine.
I wasn't going to say the tripod. Saxondale.
Oh, that would be fun.
Saxondale.
Oh,
I think Saxondale would be a perfect American.
totally.
Because you just need to get like I think Saxondale's been remade a lot with what was that, Eastbound and Down kind of humor. But I think that would translate really, really well.
But here's the fun thing about Saxondale is Coogan's pretty good about that too. If you look at the bulk of his stuff, he the scatological stuff and like the really crude, it's very slight. Like, the overall body of work, he doesn't tend to go there. So that's the thing that I could see that happening on. You could take an American a guy, because Coogan's playing older than he is in that show.
Yeah, he's
take an American
wig and stuff.
Yeah, get an American guy who's like, looks like he's he's got he'd been on the road with these bands or whatever, and it's just it could be because it has some poignancy to it at times, that show. I could see that working without having to tweak it much, because it
would translate.
It would translate well, and it's not particularly blue that you'd have to worry about it being on Fox or whatever, like what you could get away with. Like that's a great.
It'd be a great vehicle for a working class guy kind of show.
Yeah, the guy who's the character guy that's in. Oh, he's in everything, and he was actually in. Do you remember the episode? He's called Boone something, or Boone something. Do you remember the Mandalorian episode when they got the ragtag team together to do the prison break?
Oh, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
That guy. You get a guy like that, give him that
part.
Bill
Burr.
No, not Bill Burr. The guy who gets them the job. The guy who's like, "Hey, Mando, it's good to see you. It's been a long time." He's like a big dude with a lot of hair and a big beard. He's kind of heavy set.
Oh, that dude. Yeah, dude's from Sons of Anarchy, and
he's just been in. He was in Memento. He shows up in all.
He's in Batman Begins. I just saw him the other night.
He's in Batman Begins. Yes, it's something Boone.
He's the
something.
Swear to Me guy.
Yes. You get a guy like him, or a look like that suddenly you give him an actual vehicle where he's the lead. There's some real comedy there. Like that would be a juicy remake that I think would be easy to do. It's such a great show.
Remakes.
Juicy Remakes next on Showtime after dark. that would be a good one.
Followed by moist performances.
Tomorrow morning, dry yourself off at 8.
Yeah.
That would be a good show. I could totally see that.
Okay, what's yours?
I don't have one. That's the sad thing. I asked the question without actually having one in mind. Boy, let's see. Comedy. I see all the comedy stuff that I've dug throughout the years has been pretty specific. Do you know what I mean? Like if I lay out end to end from the Python stuff and what came before, all the way up to Spaced, IT Crowd and so on. Like it's distinctive. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing against like traditional kind of sitcoms over there. There are certainly are good ones, but there's one I'll give you an example of one that did you ever see Misfits? Did you ever watch any of Misfits?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the guy called Joseph Gilgan? Tall, super tall, skinny northern guy's great actor. He's in all the Shane Meadows, This Is England flicks and TV things. He shows up in like season 3. He's the one who like has a double. That's like the darker side of himself that comes out of him sometimes. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah, it's been a long time since
he did a show on the BBC called ITV called Brassic, and both seasons are up on Hulu, and it's like 6 and 6 on both these seasons, and the writing is just if you had to pitch it to easily, it's like Lock, Stock, in this little town of these misfits that are all kind of, committing crimes and doing things, and it's rapid fire and it's great, but it's distinctive. It's hard to kind of explain it to people what this thing is. So it's hard to think of stuff that translates. That's part of the problem with how close we are to so much of this stuff, is that we know it works because it's so different, because it's so strange. Yeah. But didn't they also do, okay, this is where I always get confused. Do you remember Not the 9 o'clock news?
Yeah, they remade that in the US, not necessarily the news.
That's
okay. That worked well too, because they just found American comedians to take the concept and make it their own.
That's right. Danny Green, who I worked with, who was a delightful guy. Rich Hall, I think, was in it.
Rich Hall,
maybe?
Yeah. Who weirdly went off to England and became a big star.
Yes, I think he's still over there.
He is, and he does documentaries, weird documentaries. But I love Rich Hall, and
he's great, funny as hell.
Yeah, funny as hell, and it was like I always wondered what happened to him. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, he's doing just fine.
You didn't look across the pond. He was over there.
Yeah. He did a season on Saturday Night Live he was one of the more memorable cast members.
I don't know if I even remember that.
Yeah, he was, I think, in the '83 season or something like that. But
well, that's a good. Like they did a remake. Obviously, that was the one that worked really well. Was the remake of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right. Yeah,
I mean, it's called, you call it a game show. It's not really a game show. It's just people doing improvisation. But the format was identical to the UK one, essentially. And you just go, oh, you can't, if you get the right people, you can't lose. Like, that's.
Well, they got a lot of the same people too.
Yeah.
That show was doing well on like Comedy Central, and then I think Drew Carey, because he was working with Ryan Stiles, made it an ABC show for a while. And
but both those guys, Mockery and Stiles, they're both Canada, right? Both those guys?
Yeah, but I know Colin Mockery is. I didn't know if Ryan Stiles is Canadian or not.
Oh, I thought he was.
Yeah, now I gotta know. I didn't. I never knew. No. Oh yeah, he is Canadian. He's born in Seattle.
Comedy powerhouses from Canada once again.
Oh, his parents are Canadian.
Well, close.
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough.
I'll give him a pass.
I can't think of. I'm now that you asked me that, I don't know if I can think of something that would. I would say. Okay, here's one that could work, but it wouldn't work because it's really down to these scripts and how much I love this show. Inside Number 9. Number 9.
Yeah.
It's an anthology show, so every episode is different, but the through line is each episode takes place in one location. If the number 9 is the house that the camera pushes up and you go inside the house, you never leave the inside of the house. If it's this person's apartment, you never leave inside the apartment. And you don't even realize it until you've watched 3 of them. You go, oh yeah, it's inside the box, or it's inside the train car, or it's inside the cabin, or whatever. And there's a show that's on. Did you ever see a show called the Guest List? Not the Guest List, the Guest Book.
No.
Okay, well, anyway, that's up on Hulu now too, but it was like a comedic anthology type thing. Everybody rents this cabin and they all write their adventures in the cabin book, and each one is different. It's very raunchy and stuff. But that's something that I think would translate well, but you'd have to go off network to be as distinctive as it is to come up with stories and stuff. Again, not foolproof. I don't know. Have you seen any of the new Twilight Zone?
No, I watched a little bit of it. I didn't like it.
Just like I can't think of something I've looked more forward to because of the people involved, and I thought this cannot lose.
Yeah, I was the same way.
This is a can't lose situation, and I've watched every one of them, and just wow. So, let that be a warning to all of you out there.
Swing and a miss.
Swing and a miss. Yeah. Any U.S. shows you want to get started in Canada?
The only ones I'd like to host.
All right, well, we'll make some calls.
I'll do Toy Hunter here. I can be Canadian Toy Hunter.
You do have a knack though. Every time you post something, I'm like, where is he finding these places that he find these strange grails around every corner? You seem to have a nose for finding these strange things that are still out in the wild in Canada.
I'm a magnet for that stuff.
I'll say
Yeah, I
you are
enjoy
the
it.
magnet and they are the steel.
There's still, I go to a lot of flea markets and antique malls, a lot less now, but
Yeah.
because this hasn't been a great year for that, but hope springs eternal for the future.
So we're gonna say
and,
your favorite remake of all time would be, or what the most successful you thought worked was, what was it?
I'm very fond of Open All Night, even though it was a failure.
Open All Night. Okay.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite British remakes. What about you?
I'm gonna go with the second Red Dwarf Pilot. No, I haven't seen either of them. I don't know. I can't really think of anything that's significantly. Well, here's what's strange about this, and just so we're clear, one more disclaimer before we wrap this up. I'm not above, just because I love something so much, I'm not above recognizing worth in a different version of it or a remake of it. I could happily say that the remake of The Manchurian Candidate that Jonathan Demme did with Denzel Washington and Jeffrey Wright, etc., is a worthy remake to that subject matter and tried to do something a little different with it. And as remakes go, but there's only handfuls of those that are out there that work. But there's a better chance of it working as a concept as a film than it seems to be as a TV series when you talk about remakes. Yeah. Hollywood's littered with movie remakes. The TV stuff, something about it, I don't know.
I just sometimes think it just doesn't work. Like they tried to remake Porridge, a British television series about a guy, is another Ronnie Barker show, that's in prison. But the UK has a different attitude towards criminals than America,
right.
And it just doesn't kind of work in the same regard. And that's an important cultural thing there, I think, is that some of these shows, they don't translate well because it is a different culture. Believe it or not, we speak the same language, but we have different idealisms. And
yep, two countries separated by a common language.
That's right.
Utopia, that's the name of the show. Utopia. Yep. That's the UK show.
I meant to tell you, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Sorry, just came into my head. Apologize.
Anywho,
I also smell toast. Is that weird?
Do you? Doctor, I smell burnt toast. That's not a good plan.
I smell burnt toast, and I just thought of Utopia. So probably time to get off the phone.
Yeah, it's time to watch Beans of Boston. And
well, I'd call that another record-shattering episode right there.
Great success.
I don't know how we do it.
I don't know how we do it either. We are awesome. Great job. Okay,
good job, everybody.
Well, that's us for this week. Let us know what you think in the comments, or perhaps visit us in our Facebook group, Pod Stallions.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Don't remake our show.
Yeah. Oh, I'd like to actually have a British remake of us.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. All right.
We'll call